It was Father's Day morning, the kind of quiet Sunday that used to fill me with warmth. The sunlight slipped through the blinds, striping the kitchen table with pale gold. I could smell burnt toast. Linda had been distracted again. She set a mug of coffee in front of me, her hands trembling slightly. That's when I saw it. A small box, neatly wrapped in silver paper, sat in the center of the table. A white ribbon tied around it like it came straight from a boutique. My name written in Emily's familiar handwriting, or what I thought was hers. The card said simply, "To Dad, with love, Emily." I froze. I hadn't heard from my daughter in almost 3 years. No calls, no letters. Not since that last argument, the one I still replay in my head every night. Linda didn't sit down. She just stood there, staring at the box like it was something dangerous. Finally, she spoke, her voice low, uncertain. "Henry," she said, "don't open it." At first, I laughed a little. "What?" "It's from Emily. Maybe she's ready to make peace." But Linda didn't laugh. Her eyes glistened, her fingers tightening around the edge of the table. "Please. Just don't open it. Not yet." Her tone made the room colder. The ticking of the wall clock grew louder, like a countdown. I asked her what she meant, but she just shook her head. "It's not what you think." My stomach twisted. I reached for the card, running my thumb over the ink. The handwriting was close, but something about it wasn't quite right. Too neat. Too deliberate. And at the bottom of the note, Emily had signed it with a heart, something she hadn't done since she was a teenager. I looked up. "Did you already open it?" Linda's lips parted, but before she could answer, her phone started to ring. It was the old landline, the one no one ever used. The sound jolted through the silence, sharp and out of place. She walked over slowly, picked it up, and listened. I could see her face change, color draining out, eyes widening. "Who is this?" she whispered. Her voice cracked. Then she turned to me, pale and shaking. "Henry, don't touch the box. Just wait." But she didn't explain. She hung up, pressed the phone against her chest, and whispered something I could barely hear. "It's not what you think," she said again. "It's not from Emily." For a moment, I couldn't move. The sunlight flickered against the table. The smell of burnt toast lingered in the air. I could hear the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint rattle of my breath. A Father's Day gift, not from my daughter. I stared at the box. It seemed harmless, beautiful even, but now it looked like it was watching me back. I felt that same unease you get when something ordinary suddenly feels wrong. Linda's eyes darted to the window. "Please, Henry," she said again, almost pleading now. "Just trust me." But I couldn't. Not yet. Because no matter what she said, that box had my name on it. And I needed to know why. Before I tell you what was inside that box, and how that day changed my life forever, subscribe to Untold Bloodline Stories. Every story here reminds us that dignity always finds its way home. To understand what really happened at Father's Day, you need to know what led up to it, the years, the distance, and the one mistake that nearly cost me my family. To understand that Father's Day, you need to know the years that led up to it, the quiet, ordinary years that slowly came apart without me realizing. My name's Henry Lawson, 66 years old. I spent most of my life as a carpenter. Hands rough, back bent, but proud of what those years built, a small house, a good reputation, and, above all, my daughter Emily. Emily came into my world late in life. Her mother, Margaret, and I waited almost 10 years before we were blessed with her. From the moment I held that tiny bundle wrapped in pink, I knew my life's purpose had changed. Everything I did from that day forward, every long shift, every weekend job, was for her. We lost Margaret when Emily was 12. Cancer, fast, cruel, and unstoppable. I remember Emily standing beside me at the funeral, clutching my hand so tight her nails dug into my skin. She didn't cry that day, she just stared at the coffin and whispered, "It's just you and me now, Dad." And for years, that's how it was. We became a team. I taught her how to hold a hammer, how to sand down edges until they were smooth enough to run a hand across. She'd sit on the workbench with her feet dangling, humming while I worked. I'd glance over, and for a moment, I'd see Margaret in her eyes, that same spark, that same stubbornness. Life wasn't easy, but it was ours. Then came Linda. I met her at a local hardware store, 2 years after Margaret passed. She was kind, thoughtful, and good company, at least in the beginning. Emily was 16 then, old enough to understand but too young to accept someone else in her mother's place. At first, I thought it was just teenage rebellion. But as months passed, the tension grew thicker. Every family dinner ended in silence, every gesture of kindness from Linda was met with suspicion. Emily once told me, "She's not who you think she is, Dad. She doesn't care about us, just what you can give her." I brushed it off. I told myself Emily was grieving in her own way. Linda, on the other hand, seemed patient, never raising her voice, never complaining. She'd smile sadly and say, "She'll come around." Except she didn't. When Emily went off to college, our phone calls grew shorter. She stopped coming home for holidays. Birthdays were just texts, polite, distant, careful. The final break came 3 years ago. Emily had just graduated, and I wanted to help her set up her own place, give her a part of the savings I'd built over the years. But when I mentioned it, she exploded. "Don't you dare hand over another cent, Dad. She's already taken enough." She was shaking, furious. I didn't understand. "Taken what?" I asked. Emily's words cut deep, the house, the money, the decisions, all of it. "You've let her replace Mom and erase me." I told her she was wrong, that Linda was good to me, that she didn't control anything. Emily just stared at me, eyes full of disbelief. "Then you're blind," she said quietly. And that was it. She left that night. No call, no goodbye. For years afterward, I told myself she just needed space. But sometimes, late at night, I'd sit in my workshop staring at the empty stool she used to sit on. I'd still see her swinging her legs, still hear her humming. And I'd wonder what I'd done wrong. Linda never spoke badly of Emily, but she didn't encourage me to reach out either. Anytime I mentioned calling her, she'd sigh and say, "She's made her choice, Henry. You can't force her back." Eventually, I stopped trying. Father's Day came and went like any other Sunday. No calls, no cards, just silence. Linda would make me breakfast, smile, and say, "Maybe next year." So when that package arrived, wrapped neatly with my name on it, something inside me cracked open. Hope, guilt, confusion, all tangled together. I wanted to believe it was her. I wanted to believe that after all these years, Emily had found it in her heart to forgive me. But there was something about Linda's reaction, the way she stared at that box like it carried the weight of a secret, that told me I was standing on the edge of something I didn't understand. I remember her words again, "It's not what you think." At the time, I didn't know whether she meant danger, or truth. All I knew was that both were coming for me. Transition line. That box wasn't just a Father's Day gift, it was a message. And before the day was over, it would force me to face everything I'd been too blind to see. After that day, I began to notice things I hadn't before, little moments that didn't make sense until later. Looking back now, they were warnings I ignored, the kind of signs that only become clear when the damage is already done. It started a few weeks before Father's Day. Linda had been restless, distracted. I'd find her sitting up late in the living room, staring at her phone, quickly turning off the screen when I walked in. When I asked what was wrong, she'd smile and say, "Just couldn't sleep." But her smile didn't reach her eyes. There were phone calls too, numbers I didn't recognize, often after midnight. Sometimes, when the phone rang, she'd step outside to answer. One night, I caught part of a whisper, "He doesn't know. I'll handle it." When I asked her about it, she laughed it off. "Henry, you're imagining things," she said. It was just the neighbor asking about the block meeting. I wanted to believe her. I always did. Then one morning, while sorting through the mail, I noticed something odd. There was a letter addressed to me, but the seal was already broken. I asked Linda if she'd opened it accidentally, and she just said, "It must have torn on the way." I let it go. But something about the way she said it, it felt too quick, too practiced. A few days later, I went into the garage to find my old toolbox and found a photograph sitting on my workbench. It was a picture of Emily from years ago. She was standing in front of the first cabinet we built together, her smile as bright as the morning light. Someone had written on the back, in unfamiliar handwriting, "Some people never change." I asked Linda about it. Her face went pale. "Where did you get that?" she asked. "It was in the garage," I said. "Did you put it there?" She shook her head but didn't meet my eyes. "I don't know what you're talking about." Then she left the room without another word. That night, I dreamed of Margaret. In the dream, she stood by the doorway of my workshop, her hair catching the sunlight like it used to. She said, "Henry, don't let them take her from you again." I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart pounding. I told myself it was just a dream. But something about it stayed with me, the way Margaret's eyes seemed full of warning. Father's Day arrived the next morning. The world outside looked normal, bright sky, the sound of kids riding bikes down the street, a soft breeze moving through the curtains. But inside, there was tension in every breath. Linda barely touched her breakfast. She kept glancing at the clock, her fingers tapping the table in a nervous rhythm. When the knock came at the door, she jumped. It was a courier. He was young, polite, and efficient. He handed me the silver-wrapped box and asked for a signature. Linda hesitated before taking the pen. I could see her hand trembling as she wrote her name. When he left, she set the box down carefully, almost fearfully, as though it might break, or explode. "What's wrong?" I asked. "It's from Emily." "Isn't that a good thing?" But she didn't answer right away. Her gaze stayed fixed on the package. "Henry," she said finally, "please, just promise me you won't open it until I say so." "Why?" Her voice dropped. "Because I don't know if it's really from her." Her words hit me like a chill down my spine. "Of course it's from her," I said. "Who else would?" Before I could finish, she walked away. The rest of the day moved slowly, heavy with silence. I tried reading, but I couldn't focus. Every time I looked at that box, I felt a strange pull, like it was daring me to touch it. That night, long after Linda went to bed, I sat in the dark living room, staring at the box under the soft light of the lamp. The wrapping shimmered faintly. The card rested on top, the handwriting too neat to be Emily's but familiar enough to make me doubt myself. Then I heard it, just a faint sound, but unmistakable. A soft tap, tap, tap from inside the box. I froze. My breath caught in my throat. I leaned closer. The sound stopped. I stayed there for what felt like hours, waiting for something, anything. But there was nothing more. When I finally stood, I noticed the window curtain moving, just slightly, as if someone had been standing outside. I stepped closer, looked out into the darkness. The street was empty. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was watching. That night, I barely slept. When I did, I dreamed again, Margaret, standing in the workshop, whispering the same words, "Truth doesn't hide forever." When morning came, the sunlight hit the box once again, glinting off its silver paper. Linda was already in the kitchen, her eyes red from crying. She didn't look up when I walked in. I sat down, staring at that box, feeling my pulse in my temples. Something was inside it. Maybe not what I feared, but certainly not what I expected. And when the phone rang moments later, I knew my life was about to change forever. That call pulled back a curtain I didn't even know existed, and when I finally opened that box, I realized how far betrayal can reach when it's hidden inside a family. The phone rang just as I reached for the box. It wasn't the landline this time, it was Linda's cell. She froze, staring at the screen. For a second, I thought she wouldn't answer. Then, with a shaking hand, she pressed it to her ear. "Hello." Her voice was barely a whisper. A pause. Her face went pale, her eyes darted toward me. She said nothing, just listened. I could hear a faint male voice on the other end, calm but urgent. When she hung up, she didn't move. "Who was that?" I asked. Her lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, she said, "Henry, whatever you do, don't open it." But something in her tone told me the warning had come too late. I stood, the chair scraping against the floor. The box sat there, perfectly still, almost glowing in the morning light. Every instinct told me to leave it alone, but there was another voice, stronger, whispering from somewhere deep inside, "She's hiding something." So I did what any father would do. I lifted the box. It was heavier than I expected. The wrapping crinkled softly under my fingers as I untied the ribbon. Linda stepped forward, almost reaching for it. "Henry, please." But I kept going. When I lifted the lid, the first thing I saw was wood, smooth, familiar, carved by hand. My heart skipped. It was one of my old designs, a small bird, wings spread, carved from cedar. Emily and I had made it together when she was 12. It was her first finished piece. For a moment, emotion replaced fear. I smiled faintly. She remembered. Then I noticed there was more inside. Beneath the carving was a flash drive, small and black, wrapped in a folded envelope. On the envelope, written in red ink, were the words, "Dad, if you're reading this, it means you finally know." I looked up. Linda's face had gone white. "Don't read it," she said. But I was already unfolding the paper. Inside was a printed document, an email chain between Linda and my daughter, Emily. The first line made my knees weaken. "If you ever try to contact him again, I'll make sure he never sees a dime of his savings. You've done enough damage." Linda lunged for the letter, but I held it out of her reach. "What is this?" I demanded. Her silence said enough. I set the paper down and grabbed my laptop from the counter. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely plug in the flash drive. Linda tried to stop me, her voice trembling now. "Henry, please, you don't understand. It's not what you think." But I did. The drive opened a series of recorded voice messages, hundreds of them. The first began to play automatically. It was Emily's voice. "Dad, I don't know if you'll ever hear this, but I keep trying. I keep sending letters. She keeps sending them back. I just want you to know, I never stopped loving you." My breath caught. My eyes burned. One by one, the recordings played, Emily begging Linda to let her talk to me, trying to explain that the accusations about money were false. Linda stood motionless behind me. The only sound in the room was Emily's voice echoing through the speakers. "You told him I was after his inheritance. You told him I said terrible things about Mom. None of it's true. Why are you doing this?" I turned to look at Linda. She was crying now, silently. "Why?" I asked. Her voice was small, broken. "Because she wanted to take you away from me." "She's my daughter," I said. "You took her from me." She fell to her knees, covering her face. "I was scared, Henry. After Margaret. I was terrified you'd leave me too. I stared at her, unable to move. Years of confusion, guilt, and heartbreak were crashing down at once. Every unanswered call, every quiet holiday, every message that never came, all of it traced back to her. Then I saw the last line in the printed document. It was from Emily, sent months ago. Mom would be ashamed of both of us. You for lying. Him for believing you. I sat down slowly, the weight of it all pressing against my chest. For the first time, I didn't feel angry, I felt hollow. The woman I thought I could trust had spent years rewriting the truth. And my daughter, my only child, had suffered for it. Linda reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Get out, I said quietly. She looked up, stunned. Henry, please. I said get out. Her sobs filled the silence, but I couldn't listen anymore. I picked up the small bird carving, the last piece of Emily's childhood, and held it in my hands. I realized then that the box wasn't a gift. It was evidence. A cry for help from a daughter who'd run out of ways to be heard. I sat there for hours, listening to every recording, reading every message. By the time I finished, the sunlight outside had turned to dusk. When the last file played, Emily's voice came through one final time. If you ever hear this, Dad, I hope it's not too late. I closed the laptop, my eyes wet, my hands shaking. It's not too late, I whispered. But deep down, I didn't know if that was true. That night, I packed a bag, drove to my lawyer's office, and handed him the entire box. Because if what Emily said was true, this wasn't just betrayal, it was a crime. The next morning, I didn't go to my workshop. I didn't make coffee. I didn't even speak to Linda. I just sat at the kitchen table with that silver box in front of me, the wooden bird beside it, and my lawyer's number written on a scrap of paper. The truth had already cracked the air between us, but what came next shattered it. By the time Linda came downstairs, I'd already called my lawyer, Robert Malloy. He'd known me for nearly 2 decades, handled my business contracts, my house deed, even Margaret's will. When he heard my voice, he didn't need much explanation. Bring everything, he said. And Henry, don't let her near that box again. Linda stood in the doorway as I slipped the flash drive and papers into an envelope. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her hair unkempt. She looked like she hadn't slept either. Where are you going? She asked quietly. To fix the damage you caused. She took a step forward. You're making it sound worse than it is. Henry, I was just protecting me. I snapped. From what? My own daughter. She flinched, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes, not guilt, but fear. Henry, please, she whispered. You don't know what you're starting. But I did. And I was already too far in to turn back. I left without another word. When I got to Robert's office, he listened in silence as I played Emily's recordings. Every word filled the room like a slow storm, Linda's manipulation, her threats, her intercepted letters. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. Henry, this isn't just emotional cruelty, he said finally. It's fraud. Interfering with correspondence, financial misrepresentation, this could go criminal. I nodded slowly. I don't care about charges. I just want the truth clear, for Emily to know I never turned my back on her. Robert sighed. We'll make it right. That afternoon, he filed the paperwork, freezing all joint accounts, revoking Linda's access to my estate, and securing every document as evidence. When I got home, Linda was waiting on the porch. She looked smaller somehow, her voice fragile. You called your lawyer, she said. He called me. I had to, I replied. You lied to me for years. Tears welled in her eyes. I did it for us. She would have destroyed everything we built. We didn't build anything, I said coldly. You built walls between me and my own blood. She tried to reach for my arm, but I stepped back. You used my grief, Linda. You made me think my daughter hated me. Her voice broke. I just wanted to be enough for you. Then you should have been honest. Silence filled the porch, heavy, final. She turned away, covering her face, and walked inside. I didn't follow. That night, I packed her things into boxes. For every shirt, every picture frame, every belonging, I felt another piece of her deceit peel away. When she came downstairs and saw the boxes lined by the door, she froze. You're throwing me out. No, I said softly. You threw yourself out the moment you decided my love was something to control. She didn't argue. She just stood there, trembling, before walking out into the night. I watched her tail lights fade into the dark, and I swear I felt the house exhale, like it had been holding its breath all those years. The days that followed were quiet. Too quiet. I didn't realize how much her presence had filled the air, even with lies, even with distance. Then came the hardest part, calling Emily. It took me 2 hours to build the courage. My hands shook as I dialed her number, unsure if she'd even pick up. She did. Her voice was cautious, tired. Hello. Emily, I said, barely above a whisper. It's Dad. There was silence on the other end. Then a quiet inhale. Dad? My throat tightened. I know everything now. About the letters. The messages. Linda. Her voice trembled. You believe me? I do. I should have believed you from the start. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The only sound was her soft crying through the phone. I thought you hated me, she said. She told me you said awful things, that you didn't want me at the house anymore. I closed my eyes. She lied. Every word of it. We talked for nearly an hour that night. She told me about the years she spent wondering if I'd forgotten her, how she moved across the country to escape the pain of being unwanted. And when I told her about the recordings, she went quiet again, not in disbelief, but exhaustion. Dad, she said, you don't have to fix everything. I just needed to know you still cared. I never stopped. When the call ended, I sat there in the dark, staring at the old family photo still hanging above the fireplace, Margaret smiling, Emily barely 5 years old, sitting on my shoulders. I thought about how fragile truth can be, how easily it gets buried under good intentions and fear. Over the next few weeks, things moved quickly. Linda's legal rights to my finances were revoked. Robert advised me to pursue charges for mail interference, but I didn't. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. One afternoon, Linda came back to collect the last of her belongings. She stood at the doorway, tears streaking her face. Henry, she said quietly, I know you hate me, but I did love you. I just didn't know how to share you. I nodded once. I don't hate you, Linda. I just don't trust you. And that's something love can't survive. She looked down, nodded, and walked out without another word. When the door closed, I felt something inside me finally settle, not relief, exactly, but clarity. I went to the workshop that evening, the same place where Emily and I used to build things together. The tools were rusted, dust thick on the bench. I picked up a piece of cedar wood and began to carve again, not for sale, not for work, just for peace. As the shavings curled to the floor, I realized something: truth, no matter how long it's buried, always finds its way back to the surface. And sometimes, justice isn't about punishment. It's about seeing clearly, at last. A month later, I got on a plane, the first time in years, to see my daughter face to face. I didn't know if she'd forgive me, but I knew I had to try. It was a gray morning when I boarded the plane, the first time I'd left Denver in over a decade. I stared out the window as the clouds swallowed the city below. My hands trembled slightly, not from age, but from the weight of what I was about to face. Emily lived in Seattle now. She had built a quiet life, a job at an architectural firm, a small apartment near the waterfront. She hadn't told me much over the phone, her voice stayed cautious, like someone afraid to trust good news. I couldn't blame her. When I arrived, the sky was draped in soft rain. I stood outside her building for several minutes before pressing the buzzer. My reflection in the glass doors startled me, older, more tired, but still the same man who'd promised his daughter he'd always be there. "Hello." Her voice came through the speaker, faint but familiar. "It's me," I said. "Dad." A pause. Then a soft click as the door unlocked. I climbed the stairs, each step heavy with years of silence. When she opened the door, I saw the girl I'd raised, older now, eyes sharper, but still my Emily. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then she whispered, "You really came." I nodded. I had to. She stepped aside, and I walked into her apartment. It was small, neat, and filled with plants. But what caught my eye were the wooden carvings on her shelves, the same kind we used to make together. Birds, boxes, picture frames. Each one finished with the same style of polish I'd taught her. "You kept making them," I said quietly. She smiled faintly. "I never stopped." It reminded me of better days. We sat at her kitchen table. For a while, we just looked at each other. The silence wasn't hostile, just thick with years that couldn't be undone. "I listened to all your recordings," I said. "Every one of them." Her eyes filled with tears. "I thought I was shouting into a void. I didn't think you'd ever hear me." "I heard you," I said. "Too late, maybe. But I did." She nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. "I wanted to hate you, Dad. For not fighting harder. But I couldn't. Because deep down, I knew you were being lied to." I reached across the table, my hand trembling slightly, and she took it. Her fingers were cold but steady. "I'm so sorry, Emily," I said. "For every missed call, every message I never read, every time I chose peace over truth." Her voice broke. "You didn't choose peace. She stole it from you." For the first time in years, I felt something in my chest loosen, guilt unraveling into something lighter. We talked for hours. She told me about her mother, how she'd visited Margaret's grave every year, even after moving away. She told me about her job, the friends she'd made, and the quiet strength she found in being on her own. When I mentioned Linda, Emily shook her head softly. "She was always threatened by me," she said. "I could see it the first day you introduced her. I just never thought she'd go that far. I didn't defend Linda. I couldn't. There was no justification left." Before I left that night, Emily handed me a small box. It was unwrapped, plain wood, no ribbon. Inside was a small carving of a heart held between two hands. "I made it after I heard your voice again," she said. "It's not perfect, but I wanted you to have it." I held it in my palms. It was warm, smooth, alive. "I'll keep it on my desk," I said. "Next to the first bird we ever made." When I left, the rain had stopped. The air smelled of salt and cedar. For the first time in years, I felt light, like a man who'd been carrying a ghost and finally put it to rest. A week later, Emily called me again. This time, her voice was bright. "I was thinking," she said, "maybe you could visit again next month. There's a craft fair downtown. You could show me a few tricks again." I laughed softly. "I'd like that." And I meant it. In the following months, the distance between us faded. We spoke every few days, not about the past, but about life. About work, recipes, and small things that only matter when they're shared. I didn't rebuild the same relationship I once had with her. Something had been lost, years, memories, time. But what we built instead was stronger. Real. honest. One evening, she sent me a photo of her workshop, shelves lined with carvings, tools arranged neatly. The caption read, "Guess I really am your daughter." I stared at the photo for a long time before replying. "You always were." That night, I sat alone in my own workshop, the heart carving resting beside the small cedar bird. Two pieces of the same story, one from the past, one from the healing. I realized then that forgiveness doesn't erase what happened. It just makes space for peace. And peace, after all these years, finally felt possible. If stories like this remind you that truth always finds its way home, even after betrayal, subscribe to Untold Bloodline Stories. Here, we share the power of real family redemption and the quiet strength that comes with forgiveness. A year later, on Father's Day, I received one last box, this time with no secrets, no fear, only love. Inside was a gift that told me our story had finally come full circle. A year later, Father's Day came around again. The morning light filtered through my workshop windows, cutting across the table where two carvings sat side by side, the cedar bird Emily and I had made years ago, and the small heart she'd given me when we found our way back to each other. The house was quiet now. Too quiet, sometimes. But peace has a sound of its own, the soft creak of the floor, the hum of the kettle, the rhythm of a life no longer built on lies. Around noon, there was a knock at the door. When I opened it, a delivery man stood there, holding a package, small, square, neatly wrapped in brown paper. "Mr. Lawson?" he asked. "That's me. Delivery from Seattle." I smiled before I even signed. "Of course it is." Inside was a box, simple this time, no ribbons, no mystery. I set it on the table, my hand steady as I unwrapped it. Inside was another carving, two open hands holding a heart between them, just like the one Emily had given me before. But this one had words engraved along the edge. "No more secrets." There was also a letter folded underneath. "Dad. This time, you don't have to wonder what's inside. Everything between us is open now. I just wanted you to know that the best gift you ever gave me wasn't money, or the things you built, it was learning that truth, even when it hurts, can still heal what lies destroy. Love always. Emily." I sat there for a long time, reading her words again and again. It's strange, how a year can change everything. How a box that once held deception could now carry forgiveness. After finishing my coffee, I took the carving and drove to the cemetery. The road was lined with the first blooms of summer, soft colors that reminded me of Margaret's garden. When I reached her grave, I knelt down and brushed away the leaves. Her name was carved into the stone as carefully as any work I'd ever done with my hands. "I made a mess of things for a while," I said quietly. "But she's back. Our girl. She's okay now." The wind moved through the trees like a sigh. I placed the new carving at the base of the stone. The engraved words caught the sunlight, "No more secrets." I stayed there for a while, thinking about how close I'd come to losing everything that mattered. Not because of death, but because of silence. Truth has a strange way of finding its path. You can bury it under lies, hide it in fear, even convince yourself it's gone, but it always waits. And when it comes, it doesn't ask for permission. It arrives to set you free, whether you're ready or not. When I got home that evening, the house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt earned, the kind of quiet that comes after a storm finally breaks. I went back into the workshop and picked up a fresh piece of cedar. My hands, though older, still remembered every motion, the scrape of the blade, the scent of wood. This time, I wasn't carving for the past. I was carving for what came next. As the shape took form, I thought about all that had happened, the betrayal, the loss, the slow road back to trust. It wasn't a story I'd ever imagined living, but it was mine. And if there was one lesson in it all, it was this. Family isn't built on perfection. It's built on truth, the kind that survives even the worst lies. By the time I finished carving, the sun had dipped low behind the trees. I wiped my hands, placed the new piece on the shelf beside the others, and smiled. There was no bitterness left in me. Only gratitude, for second chances, for forgiveness, and for the quiet strength that comes when the truth finally breathes again. Sometimes I still think about Linda, not with anger, but with understanding. Fear makes people do desperate things. It turns love into control, care into possession. But in the end, it's truth that decides who stands and who falls. And for the first time in many years, I knew which side I stood on. I locked up the workshop, turned off the lights, and looked at the carvings one last time, a story told in wood, shaped by pain but finished in peace. If you've lived long enough, you learn that time has a way of revealing what's real. Lies decay, but truth endures. And sometimes, the hardest thing to do isn't forgiving others, it's forgiving yourself for not seeing sooner. That's what Father's Day means to me now. Not gifts or celebrations. Just a reminder that love, when it's honest, never truly leaves. If this story reminded you that truth, no matter how long it's hidden, always finds its way home, subscribe to Untold Bloodline Stories. Because every story here reminds us that dignity, love, and honesty are worth fighting for.